Meeting to orders.
Well, we might as well get started.
Sure.
Well, until Linda shows up. I guess it's in my lap here. I think this meeting has a specific, when we left from our last meeting, this meeting had a specific objective, I think. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah. I think today, and Kristen, you can hop in if I get down the path wrong. I think one of the main objectives that we're trying to resolve today is to hopefully either make significant progress or make some decisions towards the planning boundary. Because once we get that planning boundary finalized, we can submit our formal notice to proceed to the state, and hopefully the state will then accept that and give us our notice to proceed, and then we're full speed ahead. But the last piece of that notice to proceed is the decision around the planning boundary.
Could you sort of summarize for us what we need to decide today on the planning boundary? We were pretty much in agreement, I think, in most of it. Is that
Sure.
right?
Kristen, do you want to take that? I feel like you'll describe that much better than me, or Kim.
Yeah, sure. I can jump in. So yeah, I think we were pretty close to feeling comfortable with the planning boundary, but I wanted to have you guys just review the maps one final time and make sure that you're okay with the extension of the boundary out to that FEMA line, the flood line. And also there was just an area up by Brant Point that I wanted to make sure that you guys were okay with how the boundary looks. And and also in Matticat, I needed to make a new map for Matticat where it kind of pushed the boundary back a little bit to cover the Matticat ditch. So I did that. And once it's time to jump into the planning boundary discussion, I could show you those maps and see if folks agree on it or if we need to make any more.
Oh, I think
But yes.
I want to show them.
Sure. Yep. We can jump right in. And yes, we do need this finalized to submit the notice to proceed. So this is the last piece.
The email you sent out with the attachment, the boundaries are cut off. Do you have like a full picture of that somewhere?
So let's see, I do somewhere. What I can do is, hold on one sec. Basically, I just zoomed in on the areas where the boundary had changed. The rest of the boundary was all the same as the previous 2009 plan, and just zoomed in on the changes.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I'll see once we move on to the next part of the agenda, I can also bring up likely a couple other maps that show it zoomed out. But here is, first I'll show Matticat. And so the green line is the old boundary. I'm sorry, the red line is the old boundary. The green line would be a new potential boundary. So we had talked about possibly including this area up here. So that would be new, and then following this and bumping this back out here. And wanted to see if that covers what people were thinking should be included in this.
And maybe could you just summarize the rationale for bumping it out the way we did?
Well, so I think that was, I think it was Seth maybe that mentioned he thought it was important to include the Matticat ditch area back here and then out to, I think this is Matticat Road. And then this area, I think that this was and correct me if I'm wrong, but the reasoning was because of like potential sea level rise and flooding, that this area, including this, all seemed to make sense. Was that correct? Were there other?
That whole area above the red line, that green area it's titled, it's wet. So it's even though the entrance where the where the red line joins the, the green line there down a bit to, I guess I guess it's North Point is really what is north, and then the Eel Point is what comes into the harbor, but that entrance is narrow, but it fills up with water, so I'm sure that, you know, eventually it'll all be underwater.
So I guess the question is does anybody have any problems, concerns, objections to going to the green line? If not, do we vote or we just say
Well,
everybody agrees?
can I say something?
Yeah.
The other thing is I think Linda felt that because of the changing of the navigation channel into there, the constant changing of that she felt, I'm just giving you what I remember as her rationale was that, it should be included in any type of harbor planning because of the changing navigation channel.
Okay, are there any, can we go ahead and agree that this is how we want to go forward on Mattocket? Do you need a vote?
I think we should probably.
I think we
vote.
should probably just, someone make a motion to accept the planning boundary for Mattocket.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Can I
Still
just
move.
ask a question? Is it too far out to say that, you know, the line there should go down and encompass Long Pond?
Yeah, so I can speak to that because I was the person who advocated for moving the planning boundary out from the red out to Mattocket Ditch. Obviously, Mattocket Ditch is tidally influenced, actually connected to the harbor on a daily basis. Long Pond is also connected through the culvert there. But I think if we take any part of Long Pond, we're gonna ultimately have to take all of Long Pond because it's all connected. So I think in the future, if there are coastal resiliency changes to those culverts, turning them into expanded culverts or bridges or who knows what, then in the next 10-year update, we'll take that. But for now, I think that's an appropriate stop point at Mattocket Road. It's currently mapped as a flood zone as well, so it sort of makes sense. The other part is not mapped as a flood zone.
So do we have a motion?
I've got one quick question. On the north part here of Eel Point, the green line that sort of comes down from on the far left from the northwest, comes down to the southwest, then straight east. We can't see over to the west of that where it goes over toward Tuckernuck, but is there any point in bringing that straight over to the north side of the point there rather than coming down to the southwest? I mean, southeast and then straight east?
So you mean kind of, can you see my mouse going like
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what is there any point to just come straight across there?
I thought that was Linda's point last time, was that where all of that sand changes for navigation. I thought she meant the line going from the northernmost point of Eel Point and being more in line out to Tuckernuck instead of dipping down. She's not here to speak for herself, but that's how I interpreted her comment last time.
No.
I don't know how much it matters.
Mhm.
I think if we make that change, I mean, you could certainly. I think if you just extended that line on Eel Point West to where it intersects.
Yeah,
I think you could still adopt the planning boundary just kind of as
Yeah.
amended at the meeting. And I'm sure that we can adjust the map to pick that up.
it cleans it up a little bit and it also
Yeah.
keeps in that deep channel there just to the west of Eel Point, which is the navigational channel into the harbor from the north.
Yep,
That's fine.
yeah,
Okay,
I can easily make that change. So we'll just have the line kind of come straight out like this and then reconnect with the old boundary.
So I'll move to adopt the planning boundary for Mattocket as amended at the meeting.
Second.
the second? Who was that, a second?
I seconded.
Okay, any further discussion? Now, how do we do the,
You have to do it by roll, unfortunately, because we're doing it remote. So
oh,
you could just go around and do Seth and then Samantha and then.
okay, one,
Aye.
I
Aye.
aye, oh wait, I have to wait until everybody.
No, you can
That's
just
fine, yeah.
do Dave and Steve,
David?
Aye.
and Steve.
Aye.
All right,
Okay,
good to go. Now we just
And-
gotta do the in-town one.
Yes, and now the in-town one, and I also can send these to Linda and once they're final and just make sure that she's okay with them. Does that make sense to everyone?
yeah,
Okay. Good, and then the in-town one, so this is following the flood line from FEMA. And basically all of this, it seemed to, I believe, make sense to everyone. This is just, the red line is the old boundary, the green is the potential new boundary. I believe this made sense to everyone. The only question I had came up here where I believe some were interested in having the line just go straight out, or kind of actually straight like this out, and including this little corner. Or we can follow this kind of squiggly line that this is more true to the actual flood boundary. And really, we can do either.
It's all gonna flood. I mean, that little area that you were, little area is the Cliffside Beach Club, right? And the Gaza Strip and the Galley Beach, and that's all low level. I mean, I don't understand why it goes zigzag like that. It's all gonna flood eventually. It's all on the same level as Jetty's Beach and
Yeah, they already get some sunny day flooding down at Cliffside anyway.
yeah.
so we just take the line and go out, straight out to the beach and then over to the jetty?
So the other option would be kind of like coming like that. And
Right.
then, like,
Kind of bisects the cliffside. I don't know if that's a concern of ours or not, that it's doesn't encompass their whole property. I'm not sure that's something we need to be concerned about or not.
I think the cliffside a little bit too, right, is on the sound side of the jetty. So I think however you guys want to box it in there is fine, or you could even run it down the red line down Bathing Beach Road.
They're just, all the properties that are concerned are down below that. I mean, that coastal bank goes from Eel Point all the way, wraps around, goes through town, all the way down to 56, pretty much. And anybody who's up there is not as in danger as anybody who's down there. And all of the Cliffside Beach Club is down there. They're down on the beach, so, I mean, I know this isn't crack, but we should be thinking in that way since I'm the road.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but this is the Harbors Plan Update Committee, not the Coastal Resiliency or Flood Advisory Committee. And with respect to like what Jeff is saying, even with any amount of flooding, you're still not really in the harbor there. I mean, maybe you will be if we change the position of the jetty at some point, but that's much more than a 10-year plan.
Yes, but I'm on this committee to represent FLAG, so those are our interests. And it's outside of the harbor, yes, but it's the same level. I just think drawing a line and saying, okay, all you people, we're gonna cover you in the harbor. And then half of it doesn't get covered.
Are you okay with the yellow line that was just put
I
in
would
there?
just say the yellow line would go just a bit more to the west and encompass those buildings that are down on the bottom there. I mean, since
Okay.
we're already outside of the harbor anyway, we're outside of the red and green lines.
Can we redo the,
Because
whoever has that
Yeah,
yellow pen?
what I'm saying is that eventually that'll become part of the harbor. The jetties are only half-tide jetties. Eventually, they're gonna be underwater unless we raise them up.
well, I think we'll have to take that whole sliver of beach there then, if we're gonna do that.
so meaning you would want it, hold on. Still in eraser mode. Draw mode. Should be a draw mode. Well, basically, are you saying you'd rather have it come out this way? Like and
No.
include, oh,
Have it go straight up and follow the bank. So straight out, and I mean, I guess some buildings would be. I'm just saying it's not as black and white, that's all. Because we don't know where the harbor boundaries are going. Something like that. I mean, it
Yeah.
kind of cuts them in half, but. We do have the option of changing the area anyway in 5 years, so.
How do people feel about that?
I, I think for this purpose, I think that's fine. I think that when we get into the nuts and bolts of it, I think we'll be supporting the coastal resiliency folks, and they're going to be supporting us. But I think for this, to move this forward, I think that line is fine.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Samantha seconds it. So we'll.
Roll vote yet again.
Yet again, okay,
Aye.
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 aye. Dave,
Aye.
All right.
okay,
All right, so I will correct this green line to include this. Circulate new maps and just double check with Linda and make sure she didn't have any final comments on that. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay,
That's
Great.
fine.
all right. Thank you, everyone. So I think we have a planning boundary.
okay.
Exciting.
How long does it take for, once you submit this to the state, then how long do they have to act on it to approve?
Kristen, do you want to?
Yeah, and Steve hop in too. So we'll update the request for notice to proceed, then the town will look at it and make sure that it looks good to them, and then we'll share it with Steve and his colleagues at CZM to make sure that it looks good to them before we submit the final version that will go in the environmental monitor. And then once that happens, it's a 30-day public comment period. So my guess is probably we'll be wrapped up with that process in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Steve, would you correct any of that?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. Once it gets noticed, we're basically fine with it. We go back and forth to review it to make sure everything's good. And then within a week of the close of the public comment period, we'll be issuing our notice to proceed.
Who will be showing this to Linda to get her okay with this? Because I don't think we should be submitting anything up to the state until we have Linda's sign off on this too.
No, I can take care of that.
Would you?
Yeah.
I guess, and if Linda has a big time concern, come back to us.
Yep.
And we'll have another meeting, but otherwise, if she doesn't, we can go forward.
Yes.
And that should be,
sounds
that
good.
should be resolved in the next day or so, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can make the new maps pretty quickly and I'll circulate them to her and I'll include Jeff and Tara on that email. And hopefully we can get this approved.
Okay, so in terms of the critical path here, Linda Williams and then on to the state.
Yes, great.
Awesome.
Is there anything else we want to do today?
Yes. So we did have, so Jeff and Tara have put together a spreadsheet on basically the action items that came out of the 2009 plan and the status of where they are. Did you guys, Jeff and Tara, do you have printouts of that or?
We do.
We do. We don't have enough here. I can run in and make some more.
Did you want to talk through that a little bit and just explain kind of how we got where we are?
Sure.
You pull out both of them and attach them.
Yes.
The old one, the first.
So, yeah, so there's two different versions in the printed pack. And I'll try to walk through them as best I can, and I know Samantha asked for a version. I'm happy to share a version of the Excel sheets to these. Not that it makes it make any more sense, but it does a little bit. So excuse me. So the way it's organized is there's kind of the master sheet on top. And then from each one of those, there's a separate worksheet. And thanks for opening that, Kim. That's dope. So as you can kind of see at the bottom where her mouse is, they broke each one of the interests identified in the plan. So natural resources, water quality, fisheries, public access, docks, waterfront, harbor operations, oil spill response, each have their own separate page. So can you just pick one of the spreadsheets, Kim? That's perfect. So you can see there's, just to kind of run through it, not to get in the weeds too bad. Where it's referenced in the plan is that page number where they talk about the goal in detail. And then the sections gives it a number, who the responsible parties are for, and all those things. And then what the 2007, 2009 recommendation was. And then the columns that the implementation committee added were the starting year, priority cost, estimated time to complete, and done. And then on the original one, that's where the color coding and things comes into, and it gets kind of weedy and kind of hard to get through. So what we tried to do on our version is, if you scroll over a little bit more, Kim, is we started to add either in the percentage done or just to the right kind of comments on the things that weren't labeled as complete for ones that were either underway or that we had information on. Some are, we're still trying to get some answers to as you go through all of them. But just to kind of look, obviously, like the top one there, to develop a zoning bylaw to protect commercial waterfront uses. That was completed through the harbor overlay district. But then on the opposite end, the very bottom, where it talks about the tank farm that's there, obviously for people that have been down there, all the tanks but two have been removed. And those two new tanks that are there service the boat base and fuel dock. And then like the old airline pipe that used to run next to where Great Harbor Yacht Club is, has been completely taken out. And those, so we were able to update that to complete that, but then like the goal above is an arbitrary percentage for some of those. Just kind of what the committee decided at the time. But that's kind of where we are with.
Would it be possible to send to everybody on the committee the electronic version of this?
Yeah, I sent it as a PDF, but I'm happy to send an Excel sheet for people too. I just didn't know who all had access to Excel or what level of want they wanted to deal with.
On the,
Yeah.
on the
I
early,
PDF.
I received it from Kim as an Excel attachment, so if you have Excel, it opens up and it's all right there.
Yeah.
When
And Jeff,
was it? I-
Yeah, so it was attached to the email that had the meeting agenda. I think I sent it out on Friday, but I can send that out again.
We'll resend it.
Okay.
Jeff,
Yes,
this isn't a whole, this is just an example, right?
yeah, just this one sheet that's there. That's just the waterfront example. So if
Okay.
you look at the bottom, Dave, there's all the other tabs. So if you wanted to know like harbor ops, you could pick on that, or we broke out a list of what was completed in totality at the very end. It's the complete NRD that's there. It just, as one single list, it's kind of ginormous and hard to get through. So keeping it separate by the specific interests identified in the plan made a lot of sense to kind of maintain just for ease of looking through the goals.
And who
Okay,
did all this?
If you wouldn't, if the committee wouldn't mind, I'll go through the whole thing and make comments supporting a percentage of completion. My memory is pretty good but I wouldn't expect everybody to just believe me. I'll provide documentation for each comment.
Yeah, and this, so just to kind of explain the genesis of this is we took the original spreadsheet that Sarah Octai was the manager of when
Yep.
she was the chair of the implementation committee. We went through it once and updated on the information that Tara and I had. But by no means does that mean that it's 100% correct. I think it was just enough to try to hopefully narrow the list down for stuff that we needed to look at and could kind of look at the completes to see if they needed to be updated for anything, but then could also focus on the old goals just to see what needed to be carried through onto the new plan, or if it's covered by something else or referenced somewhere else. But it's a really long list of goals.
This was done recently, Jeff?
Tara and I just did our update, I'd say, with Kim and Kristen in the last really like 6 to 8 months. We've been working on updating this list kind of to get ready for this.
Wow.
So it's pretty recent, but I know in doing that, and we actually had a meeting with Sarah with her back at Center for Coastal Studies to talk about her matrix, just to kind of get it decoded. But we also kind of in review with Kim and Kristen, and if they want to comment on this, they certainly can. There's an extraordinary number of goals in this plan
Too
and
many.
almost too many to deal with.
What is your
Or to try.
what's your general sense of how successful we, the Royal We, were in completing these goals from 2009? 50%, 25%, 10%, 80%?
Honestly, I think we're solidly over, 50 or 60% complete. There are very few zeros. I think some of the ones that were low, I think also reflect some changing town and public goals and initiatives from 2009 to kind of current, where things got replaced by more current initiatives. But I think we did a really good job given the sheer magnitude of goals. I mean, I think there was a lot of really good that came from it. I mean, some took longer, some took less, but I think both the plan committee and the implementation committee did a great job in really getting a majority of it done.
So I see part of our committee's work is to look at this whole plan and agree on stuff that we should continue for the next plan. And maybe look at some and say, hey, we really, we really don't need to deal with that either because it's complete or it's no longer relevant, maybe. And maybe, and then there'll be new ones. But I'm just always leery when there's so many objectives and so many goals. Because it's so many, nothing gets done.
Oh,
Unless we have some way of putting, priorities on it, but if we just overload the system with goals, I think it's just very hard to get geared up and working on them.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Kristen, how does this compare to other communities as far as a number of goals?
There's a lot. It really varies though, Dave. There are some communities that have 1 or 2 priorities and they use the harbor plan as the mechanism to address those 1 or 2 priorities. I think Nantucket had a lot of priorities and that's why it's as long as it is. We can certainly, and I think we've heard this loud and clear from Tara and Jeff, look at making this next version a little more user-friendly.
Right. But, and then what, not to put you on the spot, but I mean, I've talked to several harbor masters in the last couple of weeks about various sundry things, and this topic keeps coming up. I ask them, is your harbor plan current, you know, whatever, I mean. I mean, kind of a report card for Nantucket, I mean, it was a long time ago, but did we do okay as far as implementation?
We actually hold you guys up as the example of one of the first communities to think about implementation. So the effort for harbor planning didn't stop once you had your harbor plan. You guys were very proactive in terms of setting up an implementation plan. The committee used this matrix, updated the select board, and we've used you guys as a model for other communities in terms of what do you do after the plan is approved.
And to that point, I think we need to have good continuity again between this group and the implementation group as it moves forward. So, and with a shorter list, we can try to be successful again then. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it also looks like in the implementation committee, there was a prioritization process. I don't know what red, orange, yellow means, but none of us do. I think we should do a different prioritization where we actually list in order priorities in each section from top to bottom. Or if some are the same, then on the same level, but colors are arbitrary.
Yeah, I think too, one of the things we've seen is success with more recent plans. If you do that prioritization up front and it's really clear, it makes it a lot easier for people to follow and to get through. Yeah, it's color coding prioritization with words is hard. And then obviously, I always find too, and this is something I know we've talked about in scoping this too, that however you're prioritizing things, there needs to be some explanation for how you're determining priority. So when none of us are at the table, people at least have a guess with what happens.
Jeff and Tara, when you were going through this, was there any things that jumped out at you like, oh my God, we really need to get on this, and this was really, we dropped the ball here, and that we really need to deal with this now? Is there anything like that?
I think when we were going through, there were quite a few comments that we put as update because we just didn't know. It wasn't under our umbrella as far as like things, but I think Dave Franzuto, had offered to update stuff like the oil spill response or the harbor operations and stuff like that. And it was just a matter of getting a hold of Sheila and having a conversation with her. But that was the only part that I thought was difficult in updating.
I'll be honest, I think for me personally, there wasn't anything where I looked at it and said, we've really missed on things. Some of the things that were there were more comments in my head, like, I can't believe we're still talking about this in 10 years from when we started, because it seems like something that would have been easy to cross off the list. For some of them, I think it's a lot has changed since 2009. And I think it's kind of strange to think of it this way, and maybe me overthinking it a bit, is some of these goals that were there as far as where duties were being distributed. It's interesting to see what approach the town ultimately ended up taking, because in 2009, all of the harbor programming for the most part was hubbed through the then Marine and Coastal Resources Department. And that was really a staff working on the harbor plan related things about, and Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was really about 4 or 5 of us in the Marine Department that were working on some of these, and then bringing in, other town staff, whether it was planning or someone as necessary per goal.
Right.
And now there's whole departments of people that are working on these goals, and the town has expanded staffing in a lot of these areas pretty significantly. And the community's changed. There's a lot other groups that are involved and have taken a greater interest in it. So I think just updating this matrix in that regards would be really interesting for what groups have picked up certain initiatives and not, so.
I have
I-
a,
I-
Jeff,
Dave,
can
oh, sorry.
go ahead. Jeff, I was just gonna ask a quick question. Do you feel like some of the implementation became more difficult when the Marine Department was folded under the police department?
I think it depends what item you're asking about specifically. I think some of them maybe yes, but other objectives maybe no. So it's interesting. I think that whole dynamic changed quite a bit and the approach down there changed a bit. But I'm hopeful that through this process, we might be able to re-engage all of the stakeholder groups into a much more cohesive unit. That'll be my really great government answer to that question.
Yeah.
So,
That was extremely tactful.
thank you, Dave.
So,
Learn from the
Dave,
master.
David, so you have volunteered, if I understand it correctly, to go through this entire spreadsheet and tabs and everything to satisfy yourself because of your familiarity with it, to see that it's as accurate as you think it can be. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, if I mean, there's a lot of people sitting around the table right there that know me, but if I have no knowledge, I won't share that. I'll say I have no idea. But I mean, I just saw a couple of things that I know that have been implemented, that I can justify. So I don't mind doing that. I'll come up with a way to do it and I'll get it to the group and, it's not going to be in the next couple of days, but, I'd be more than willing to do that. And like I said, if I don't know, or if it's outside of something that I have any knowledge of, I'll say that.
How about if we ask the other members of the committee, because they all have a copy now, if they see something that they know about that you could benefit from their familiarity,
Most definitely.
that, so I would just
and-
ask people of the committee, if you go through it and if there's something you know particularly about, let Dave know so that he kind of is the focal point. Is that okay?
No problem at all. And by the same token, if, when you're going through the list, if there's something that you have a burning desire to know more about, send me an email.
Jeff, can I assume that you guys have already reached out to all the responsible parties for each one of the items, each one of the goals, and said, where are you guys? We're working on the plan. We want an update. Or do we have that information? Because, it's the responsible parties. They're responsible for getting it done. It's just us to make sure that they did get it done. So.
Some of them, yes, some of the responsible parties don't necessarily exist in the capacity that they did from before, so sorted that out a little bit. And we didn't go after necessarily for updates on ones that were marked as complete, right? Like just as an example, because you hear this is a really good example. I have a copy of the blue pages in my office.
Right.
Right, so I didn't necessarily reach out to the responsible parties there for if there was any updates or changes, because it exists, right, and we
Yeah.
know it exists, so, some of those no, some of them yes, but there's a really great page at the end where people can kind of see there's a breakdown of responsible parties for what's there. An overwhelming number of them resolved either in like the select board or in the Marine Department at the time. So pulling some of that together, but there are some things on here that just don't really exist in the way that they once did. So sometimes it's playing chase with people, but if anyone has any contacts or comments on any of them, I think it's always useful to go through.
I went through that and I was a little concerned that there were several items where there seemed to be multiple responsible parties. And you know, we all know, if you have more than one responsible party, you know what the result is gonna be.
You know, we might benefit from having Sarah Oaktie on the call. If we continue to talk about, we're gonna continue to talk about it, but, you know, she was the chairman of the implementation committee. She'd be a good guide for us.
Yeah, and we spoke to her just a couple months ago about sorting through the matrix as it was, but I'm sure she would be happy to participate at some point if needed.
I mean, just my own personal experience, I'm on the Roads and Right of Way Committee. And at our last meeting, I asked people, I said, hey, are you guys familiar with the 2009 plan? Are you aware of the fact that there were, I'm looking here, Roads and Right of Way Committee was responsible for, was it 4 items? They all looked at me, said, what are you talking about?
Yeah, that happens a lot when they get organized like this, where someone went off the board who was kind of the keeper of it, and then it disappears into the night.
Yeah, it might be worth noting that in the plan itself, the lead responsible party was indicated. So while there were a lot of responsible parties, there was one identified as a lead. Whether or not that was the party that ultimately did it, or if that party still exists, I don't know, but.
Yeah, that's the oversight column on the list. That's the main keeper.
But that's a great point, Jeff. In fact, that, you know, since 2009, so many organizations, committees, whatever, have changed into something else, and
Yeah,
we haven't, you know.
no. Well, it's even some of them too, right? Like just the ones where, and not to pick on them, where it lists DPW. I mean, we're now gonna be 4 directors deep on the DPW since this was adopted. And it's not hard for someone to come into that office and not ever get handed to them or told like, hey, there's this harbor plan, you're responsible for these 4 things, especially when you know, the implementation committee disbanded in like 2012 or 2013 as their terms expired in 2017. Who's the person that knocks on, you know, I guess in 2017 would have been like Rob's door and say, hey, this is the harbor plan. You have these 5 things you're responsible for. What are you doing about them? Right? That's, I think part of this update process, getting that structure in place to make sure that the continuity is there and it's kind of kept forward, I think is important.
Not to mention the fact that they are so overwhelmed that this would be at the bottom of their list of priorities.
So you got to dovetail it with their other priorities.
Well, Dave, that would be great, what you've offered to do. And I think it's something that maybe we just have, every time we meet, we can just have, you know, one agenda item of what we've learned since the last meeting on this whole voluminous spreadsheet.
No problem.
It's a beast.
No problem. I'm going south. I'll have some spare time.
Okay, is there anything else? I'm
I'll
not
just-
going by this agenda, but is there anything else we should address this afternoon?
But can I just, regarding that spreadsheet, there is definitely the exercise of noting what's complete and incomplete and ongoing. There'll also be the exercise of what do you want to carry forward to the next plan. I think it's important to first identify what's complete, incomplete, ongoing, and then at some point we should talk about how you want to go through looking at what should be carried forward. And maybe that happens after the first public meeting when we've heard from the public and can incorporate some of their feedback. Granted, it's all up for discussion, I think, until the plan is finalized, so we can always go back and carry things forward, but it would be useful, I think, to do that exercise and get a sense of how many recommendations will be carried forward and what within those recommendations needs to be updated. So just putting that bug in everybody's ear. So not the last we've seen of the spreadsheet.
Well, you may get members of the public who remember the process, look at this thing and go, how come that was never done? They were advocates of it, and so hopefully the public will help us out a lot in figuring out the priorities.
Okay. I think so. Our homework assignment for everybody on the committee is to go through this spreadsheet and we should start hacking through this. And as was suggested, at least agree on what was completed and what we would certainly like to continue on. Is that okay?
Mhm.
So then I guess the next question is, when is our next meeting?
So just if I can hop in for a second, I think if we could try to narrow it down, doing a meeting at a time is nice and all, but it'd be really great to get a little bit of an approximate schedule, so we can kind of advertise that a bit, so people will know when we're meeting. I mean, I know it's always super handy to know, like, SHAB meets on certain Tuesdays of every month, the Concom meets every other week, it's much easier to plan for attendance if it's not like, we're gonna meet now, and then we're gonna decide if we're gonna meet in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then at the next meeting to jump around a bit, so and it's nicer for scheduling rooms and stuff too.
Would it make sense for someone to send a doodle poll so that we can commit to, and I think it's been discussed, nailing down bi-weekly meetings for this committee? If we feel that there's no need to meet, we can always cancel, but to have a meeting every other week on our calendars going forward, I think would be helpful for everyone here.
Let me just ask a quick question too. Do people, will they be able to do that, during the height of summer when there's so many other, draws on people's time? I mean, should it be once a month in the summer months, once a month during the summer months, and then every 2 weeks, non-summer months? That's something to think about too.
Yeah, I think that aligns nicely too with what we have coming up. So if we meet every other week through the public meeting, which will probably happen sometime in June, we have to have it after the request for notice to proceed has been approved. So if that's going to be 2 months or so, we could plan for the public meeting in early June. And then Steve, to your point, maybe late June, we can move into a monthly meeting through the summer. I know that doesn't give you June, but
especially in the high swing of summer, to have an ever-changing meeting is impossible. But if I know that we're meeting every Tuesday at 10 a.m., even in the crazy of August, I think the more reliable we can be to each other, the better.
So are you suggesting bi-weekly in the summer too?
I'm suggesting finding a time bi-weekly in perpetuity that works for this group. And then again, to Steve's point, if we do decide that for the months of July and August, we want to cancel 50% of those, that's fine. I think it's more important to get a meeting time, get it on our calendars recurring, and be committed to it and have the option of cancel than the haywire of emails of what can we do next week. That would be my recommendation.
I agree. Knowing how crazy my summer is.
Yeah, I think that's possible.
yep, we can send around a doodle poll as your preference to hold it during the workday, or should we extend the poll out till, 7 p.m.?
That would be great. Could you do that for us?
We can do that.
Yeah, so I'll create that doodle, and when you respond to it, so what I'll have to do is select certain dates, like I'll select a Monday through Friday of 1 week, but when you're responding to it, respond to it as your availability for the following bi-weeks too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's in general, I'm free at this time.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's also understood too that people miss meetings. That's okay, as long as it's not a regular thing.
I think that if we have hybrid meetings, we'll have better attendance. And are people okay with a hybrid meeting?
Definitely.
I'll say your hybrid meeting works a lot better than other hybrid meetings I've participated in.
And the bonus is that if I miss a meeting, the hybrid meeting will be on YouTube. And I'll just watch it and do the minutes from that, which is what I do for Shab,
Right,
Great.
okay.
as long as I know who's here and who isn't.
So I don't know about for other people, but just for me in the summertime, when it's height of summer, Thursdays or Fridays or even Saturdays are better for me, but you know, everyone else has different schedules.
Well, we'll fill out the doodle poll and then it'll
Yeah.
compile for us. It's
Okay,
way smarter, right? Than doing it on the fly.
I had a question. So public meetings will start hopefully June. When we talk about next steps, identifying, people of interest in groups, this is my first town committee, everyone. Very enthusiastic to be here. What does that process look like as far as identifying groups, hosting those meetings? What do we need to be preparing for there?
Do you guys want to take that one?
Yeah, I can start and then Kim and Jack and Dak jump in. I don't know that you'll have too much obligation. That's the planning committee is responsible, I'm sorry, the planning team, so UHI and Woods Hole Group are the ones responsible for conducting a lot of those meetings and gathering information and then coming back to you guys with what we've learned. What we look for from you guys is to help us figure out who we should be talking to and maybe share it, like making introductions so that people actually respond to our requests for meetings. With regard to the public meeting though, and the big meeting, the one that we'll probably have in June, each town does that a little differently. Sometimes committee members play a role in helping to facilitate a breakout discussion or taking some aspect of the presentation to the town. So we'll figure out exactly what that looks like for committee members with you guys. But I would say you shouldn't be feeling like you need to be at all of these meetings. We certainly welcome you guys too. So that's the other thing. While we don't require anybody to participate in the meetings with stakeholders and interest groups, if you guys want to, we would welcome it for sure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm here on behalf of the Shellfish Association and specifically the Fishermen's Council. So I just want to make sure that I can help facilitate appropriate meetings with those guys so that their voices are heard. Knowing that they're all going into another style of fishing season. Just being very aware of that and that they're not Zoom guys. They're in-person people.
Yeah.
I would say it behooves all of us to be here for all of that. I know we all can't be, but we're gonna know this plan better if we know what people want.
Yeah. Well, I think too, if it helps, right? All those public sessions will at least. We'll probably still do hybrid because that's what we've been doing, but we'll still get it recorded. Just so if someone does miss, they can rewatch.
Mhm.
Help put themselves to sleep. Yes, sir.
So what if, like one of the stakeholder groups is somebody that we represent? So like, for instance, I saw that Nantucket Biodiversity Initiative is on there. I'm the chair of MBI. So would you just talk to me or would we have a meeting of MBI to discuss that or what?
Well, I
we-
think,
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think we'd leave it to you to advise. So if you think that you can represent them, then we'll talk to you. But if you think that it's better for us to come to one of your meetings or for them to join us, the rest of your members to join us for a different meeting, then we can do that. But we'll look to you to tell us.
Right. That's what I was gonna say.
so are we thinking that we will meet 2 weeks from now? Is that correct?
I guess pending a doodle poll in the next,
Yeah.
if not 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, just depending on if we're gonna be like the first and third week of the month, the second and fourth week of.
So why don't we decide what our meeting schedule is gonna be with a doodle poll? And that will be
Yeah,
our meeting
and
for
then
the
we'll-
next time. And then I guess the question is, should we be thinking of doing at the next meeting? My sense is that we need to be prepared and do some work for the June public meeting. We should not just all be sitting around without, without having a really good idea of where we are and where we want to go.
I mean, looking at this spreadsheet, I personally, looking that there's, okay, 2007 recommendation, priority, time to complete, et cetera. I'd love to, with Dave's help, see those new columns of, okay, 2023 status. So if it's 100% done, what's the implementation looking like? If it's 50% done, we're in progress, so that we can go into a June meeting with maybe a redone, simplified version that's, because in June, people are gonna go, what have you done? What's in the works? What haven't we done? You know,
I think that would be a great objective if everybody thinks that we can do that. I mean, it is, end of March. I would think that's something we should be able to have done by June.
And we should be able to answer, questions that we expect to get from the public.
Right. Yeah.
Why are you guys revising it? What's wrong with this plan? Whatever those questions are, but maybe there's 6 or 7 questions that everyone's gonna ask.
Well, if you have a 2023 kind of status report on every line item here, if someone says, well, okay, 0% update on checking in with the HDC, why hasn't that happened? Well, we have our status report and boom, there's our answer. So I think if we can have 2023 kind of status reports on every item, we're prepared to answer anything, ideally. And there's always a wild card at every meeting.
So I guess the question is how do we break up this? If people think that makes sense to use this time period to prepare for the June meeting, the question is, how do we use our time attacking this spreadsheet in the meantime? I mean, do we give individuals specific sections to work on so that we're not all working on all the sections?
I think if I may. If we let Dave finish his update and we can try to buckle down on some of the ones that we're missing still, that we've asked for info for, that next meeting, we can divvy that up
Okay,
between committee members and have a more informed breakup, because some of the goals are really big, like water quality is like 30 or 40 goals, and oil spill response, as an example, is like 8. So if you just assign by interest, it's gonna be a little bit disproportionate, but I think if we can whittle each of them down a little bit, we'll have a better grasp of how to break that up.
okay, so that would be at our next meeting, we would hear what Dave has been able to get to and how we're gonna break things up going forward. Is that correct? Jeff, is that?
Yeah, that seems right to me. I would say the one thing I would add too, and I'll lean on Kim and Kristen a bit. I also think at the public discussion too, there needs to be some talk about whether or not just the broader categories are still the correct categories, or if we need to make additions or modifications to those, right? Where we look at the bottom of the spreadsheet and you can see, natural resources and water quality and recreation and all of those things. Do we need to add a new one to address new interests within the harbor, or combine or add and subtract those? But I think if we can have an idea internally on what that might look like, there may be a public demand for something too.
Yep.
But I think that would be especially appropriate for that first public meeting to go over.
Jeff, you read my mind, and I think if I can add an agenda item for next time, it'd be great to start planning what that public meeting might look like in terms of format. And then once we do that, Kim and Jack and Dak and I can go back and kind of frame up a structure and some discussion questions and come back to you guys with that.
Can
Can I
I,
ask a question?
Yeah.
Dave, you wanna go first?
yeah, I just wondered, Kristen and Jack, you've done 100 of these. How much of the information that's in the 2009 plan is going to be for lack of a better way to put it, reprinted in the 2024 plan? Isn't there a lot of information in there that is historic and just can be carried forward, I guess, is for lack of a better way to put it?
Jack, you want to jump in?
Sure, absolutely, Dave. That's exactly right. You'll recall that the committee last time was very interested in making the background sections of the plan quite complete. And so a lot of it is historical information, and that information could be, depending on what this committee wants to do with it, could be just reserved even outside the new plan, with a reference to its availability in the 2009 plan, or
I see.
repackage it into an historic document or something, and then bring it forward just to the current. I mean, most of the descriptions of the natural resources and the activities that are going on the waterfront, we'll be taking a look at it and updating it to make sure it remains accurate. And so we'll be updating any information that needs to be updated. And then I think it'll be the committee's decision of how detailed do they want the material in the plan to be. I mean, Kristen has mentioned conversations with the committee that they might be interested in a more succinct plan. And
Right.
so we can do that, but that's the committee's decision. They might say any of these background sections would be a maximum of 2 pages long, because nobody's going to really want to read anything more. That's not to say the information that backs it up doesn't exist. It does, and we can
Right.
put that in a different place. And it all depends. It's a matter of designing the plan, what you
I mean,
want the plan to look like.
I use just as an example, the dredging history. Something
Right.
like that table
Right.
could be updated as to what dredging has occurred between 2009 and today.
Yep.
The jetties, I mean, there's certain things
Yep.
that could be updated. But to that same point, I just didn't know whether the whole thing got carried forward and updated, and I appreciate your explaining that. Maybe it's just what gets updated and the rest of it is left as a reference document.
Yeah, that might make a lot of sense at this point, because the last one was so thorough in terms of background information.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I just didn't, I mean, we're gonna kill enough trees,
Yeah.
and I just didn't know whether we needed to kill all those again. But I just see, reading down through the old plan, when you get to, for instance, and I kind of like the format myself, but that's just me, but you get kind of to we'll use again the dredging thing, that table could be updated, because you got new information and good information. So you see what I'm saying, but it doesn't
Absolutely.
all need to be carried forward. So I
No.
think you're looking at probably a smaller document.
Yeah, Dave, just to add to what Jack said, one way we could do it is tailor what we have like as the background, the new background, to really set the context for the recommendations, and not necessarily just have an encyclopedic overview of what's been going on, but really tailor that background section to explain why the recommendations are being made in
Right,
specific
right.
context.
Right. I think that's a better way to go than recreate this whole thing again
Yeah.
for history.
I think it's a great idea to keep that as like an appendix or something, because we've all been on committees where somebody a year from now comes up with this great idea, and actually it would have been in the appendix, and saved ourselves a lot of mental exercise.
That happens to me all the time. I get frustrated with having to shed the blood another time.
And
Yeah.
maybe if the committee members see a plan, it doesn't have to be a harbor plan, but any kind of plan that they really think is an effective format, we can take a look at it and see if we can adapt it for these purposes. I mean, we can show you versions of plans that we've done in other places that are different from Nantucket's, but there are lots of plans, master plans, open space plans that might have a nice format that might be suitable for what you're looking for.
So David, maybe could I suggest when you're going through this entire document that for those items where it could go into an appendix, you might make note of that? If for no other reason, it will shorten the volume of material we'll be considering going forward.
Well, like Jack said, we, and Jack far more eloquent than I, but there's a lot of that stuff that's now historic. And I honestly am a person, and I've said it before, you have to know where you've been before you know where you're headed.
Agreed.
And that there's a lot of good information there, but I don't think it needs to be carried forward. And this plan definitely needs to be, or the old plan definitely needs to be a reference readily available, so you don't end up shedding the blood again.
Okay,
That's
I think we are, I think we have a plan for going forward. We're gonna do the doodle poll. And we're gonna, based on that doodle poll, we'll then decide what our next meeting is. And hopefully, Dave, you'll be able to be present either in person or on Zoom, because
Well,
we're gonna be looking to you for what you've done up to that point.
no problem. I heard 3 weeks, and 3 weeks for me, and I'm just being difficult here. 3 weeks for me is April 12th. And April 12th, I'm going south for a month, so I'll be able to participate on a Zoom, but for that update, I would appreciate if we either did it in 2 weeks or we did it in 4 weeks. That's just my own problem, but I'm gonna be working on it starting tomorrow, but.
Right, well, we'll try to note that on the poll, Dave, and then we can square that date away. For sure.
Great.
Okay. Is there anything else? Hearing nothing, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I go around the?
Sadly, yes, you have to. Aye.
Samantha?
Aye.
Aye.
It's the fun remote meeting. right?
We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Making progress.
I think we're making
Indeed.
progress.